Woman Suffrage Memorial at the corner of Cedar and Aurora on the Capitol complex commemorates the efforts of the Minnesota women who tirelessly worked to achieve women's right to vote. Recently, retired CAP Board Secretary Paul Mandell joined me to talk about the recent renovation. The Minnesota Woman Suffrage Memorial is now over 25 years old, and it's recently undergone a facelift. Let's start with the Lattice. What does it represent, and what was done to sort of bring it up to date?
Sure. Well, it's meant to be a screen, an obstacle, which was what women met when they were trying to get the vote. It also has, on the Lattice work, it has the 23 names of women suffragettes from Minnesota. And Minnesota ratified the amendment the year before it became a full amendment. So we had a celebration here in 2019, for instance. But between the wall and the Lattice work, you're obstructed from getting into the garden, which just exemplifies how the women were obstructed from getting the vote. And the wall was redone, repoured, and the Lattice was cleaned up, and all the explanatory plaques that are along it were also cleaned and repatinated and such.
And this garden has changed a lot over the years. I think we talked once about how people wanted it to be roses and then they wanted it to be this and that. And now we have a pollinator-friendly garden. Talk about the choice of plantings, what they represent, and the ease of care, perhaps?
The garden was completely replanted. We had to take out all the old soil because it was so infested with weeds. So we replaced about 3.5 to 4 feet of soil. The memorial was supposed to have white and focus on white, yellow, and purple, especially white and yellow as the colors of the suffragettes. We started with prairie, and because this whole area is, of course, watered for lawns, the grasses were so invasive and weeds and everything else, it was the wrong condition for prairie. And of course, prairie flowers, people are used to the hybrid forms of Shasta daisies and things like that, where you see a lot more showiness. Whereas prairie, you have a small plant at the bottom and a stalky, small flower at the top. And it was never very successful because of the heavy watering and fertilizing and the bluegrass. It was favorable to bluegrass, not prairie. The soils were too good, et cetera, et cetera. So we abandoned the prairie for hybrids. We infilled for things that had not succeeded. And in this last iteration, also over time, we consolidated the gardens because there were like twice as many gardens and they just couldn't compete with the grass. So we consolidated them into larger planting beds and went to total pollinators in this example. Even the shrubs are 9-bark, which is a pollinator. And we purposely focused again on the purples, yellows, and whites. And right now you're seeing a lot of the yellows and the whites, a lot of the yellows and the purples.
One unique aspect of this memorial is the glaciation idea, talking about how long it took for women to get the right to vote. Now, it used to be these sort of gravelly pavers, and it was misunderstood over time. Now it's been upgraded, maybe more permanent. Talk about the evolution of that.
We replaced these what people thought were originally sidewalks, which were basically on-end laid stone that was deteriorating. So we replaced those with poured in place concrete that will last longer. This just reinforced both the retreat and the advance of the glaciers as kettles and moraines that we now have in like Taylor's Falls and elsewhere, where as the glacier retreated. But it was slow and evolutionary, just like the women's right to vote.
One final thing, there was one woman who was sort of spearheaded this effort, and there's a bench underneath a tree to remember her. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Barb Stuhler came to us like early, maybe 92 or 93, and she had an idea for a bench, one crab tree, and a few daffodils. And we started moving it around the campus, and we were down by the Veterans Building, and she's like, this is way too much war and stuff. And veterans, and she didn't want to invade their space, and it sort of got lost on the Upper Mall. So we picked this spot, but this spot was reserved for 3 large gardens. We have the Workers' Memorial down the bottom, and so the thing just exploded in size. And we had a competition. It was a very, very tight competition. We had 6 6 submittals, and it was decided by one vote to go this route versus I think it was a sundial with sunflowers as the theme and such. But she stuck with it through everything, and through the planting nightmares and through the weeding. She even had her women out here at one point weeding because the plant crew couldn't keep up with it. And she was just, she was unstoppable, but she had staying power and the patience to deal with bureaucracies and the weeds and all the nightmares. So we purposely did a bench to her, and they did the fundraising for that.